Sometimes to convey a meaning, no words are required. A picture does this effectively for you. We come across such pictures in our everyday life. Here are a few examples. Can you guess what each picture conveys? You've seen some examples of how pictures are used to convey important messages. You can also use pictures to represent different types of data, such as the results of a survey, or number of units produced, or number of items sold. This representation of data through the use of pictures is called a pictograph. As a pictograph uses pictures to display data, it can communicate to a wide range of people. Therefore, a pictograph is often used in newspapers and on television news programs to represent different kinds of data. Let's learn about pictographs. Let's look closely at each of the components of a pictograph. Each pictograph has a title. The title of the pictograph provides an overview of the type of information presented in the pictograph. For example, the title of this pictograph tells us that the graph displays the favorite drinks served in a school cafeteria. Another important part of the pictograph is labels. The labels on the graph tell us about the type of data and the amount of data presented. In this pictograph, the labels indicate the type of drink and the number of students who prefer the drink. Next, let's consider the scale, another important part of a pictograph. The scale indicates the number of units each symbol or picture represents. For example, the scale in this pictograph indicates that each symbol represents 10 students. Finally, a pictograph should contain pictures or symbols. Each symbol represents the number of units defined in the scale. For example, in this pictograph, one symbol represents 10 students. So, the number of students who favor vanilla milkshake is 30. Look at the pictograph closely. The first column lists the types of drinks favored by students in the school cafeteria. Beside each type of drink on the same row, we have symbols to indicate the number of students who favored that drink. To identify the most favored drink in the cafeteria, look for the row that has the most number of symbols. Notice that the number of symbols is the highest for chocolate milkshake. Thus, chocolate milk is the favorite drink among most students. The number of symbols beside chocolate milkshake is 8. We know that each symbol represents 10 students as defined in the scale. So, the number of students who favor chocolate milkshake is 8 times 10, which is 80. Now, which is the second most popular drink in the school cafeteria as shown in the pictograph? And how many students favor it? Let's take a look at another pictograph. Here, the scale shows that each symbol represents 6 headphones. But we also see some half symbols. What do you think a half symbol represents? A half symbol represents half the number of items defined by a whole symbol. For example, here one symbol represents 6 headphones, and so a half symbol represents 3 headphones. Brand B has the highest number of symbols, and so Shop Z sold the most number of Brand B headphones in November. So, how many headphones of Brand B did Shop Z sell in November? Let's first ignore the half symbol. These 7 whole symbols represent 7 times 6, that is 42 headphones. Now, this half symbol represents 3 headphones. So in all, 45 headphones of brand B were sold by shop Z in November. The Arts Association is electing a new president. Sam, Sela, Ronnie and Natasha are the candidates for the post of president. The 48 members of the association have cast their votes. Now, let's draw a pictograph. We first need to record data using any format such as tally marks or a table. We can then start creating a pictograph by putting in the labels. For this pictograph, we need the names of the candidates and the number of votes for each candidate. A common way to present this data is to use 2 columns. So, we label the first column as name of candidate and the second column as number of votes. Next, we choose a symbol. The symbol would be any visual representation. Let's choose this symbol for our pictograph. Now comes the important part of selecting an appropriate scale as per the given situation. For example, we can choose a scale where one symbol represents 1 unit, 2 units, 5 units, 50 units or even 100 units. In this case, 48 members have voted. So, a scale where one symbol represents 50 or 100 votes will not work. So, let's choose a scale where one symbol represents 2 votes. We make sure to show the scale on the graph. Then we add the symbols beside each of data as per the scale defined. As each symbol in this pictograph represents 2 votes, we draw 7 whole symbols, that is, dots, next to Sam's name on the pictograph to represent 14 votes. But how do we represent 1 vote? Now, to represent 1 vote, that is the 15th vote, we simply draw 1 half symbol. Similarly, to represent 17 votes for Sela, we draw 8 dots which represent 16 votes. To represent 1 vote, that is the 17th vote, we draw half a symbol. In this way, we can represent the remaining data on the pictograph. Finally, we put a title for the graph. Our pictograph is ready. From the data presented, you can clearly see that Sela got the most number of votes, while Sam came a close second. Now, let's say we have to represent this data on a pictograph. Here, one symbol represents 4 parks as defined in the scale. Based on the data given, state E has 6 parks. We show one symbol to represent 4 parks. Now, how do we represent the remaining 2 parks? To do so, we need to make certain assumptions and use different symbols to represent numbers 1 through 3. Thus, we can represent 6 parks in this way. Similarly, we can represent 15 parks by showing 3 whole symbols and then represent 3 parks using this symbol. In the same way, we can represent 9 parks using the appropriate symbols. However, it is not always possible to make assumptions and use multiple symbols for a pictograph. In such cases, we use estimation. For example, we have to represent this data as a pictograph. Here, each symbol represents 20 water bottles. So, to represent a number like 109, it is not possible to use multiple symbols. Then, how can we represent this number in the pictograph? Let's see. We use 5 whole symbols to represent 100 water bottles. We round off the remaining 9 bottles to the nearest 10. One symbol represents 20 water bottles, and so half a symbol represents 10 water bottles. As 9 is closer to 10, we can represent it with a half symbol. To represent 97 water bottles, we use 4 whole symbols to show 80 water bottles. Next, we round off the remaining 17 bottles to the nearest 10, which in this case is 20 bottles. So, we add one more whole symbol to the pictograph. Thus, we represent 97 water bottles with 5 whole symbols. Can you guess how to represent 118 bottles using estimation? We represent 100 water bottles with 5 whole symbols. We round off the remaining 18 bottles to the nearest 10, that is to 20, which is represented by a whole symbol.